I'm coming back from the bunker again. Is it safe? Is space gonna kill us today? Oh my God. Dear God, look at what's going on. It's an exciting day for space weather. Let me put on my jacket and we'll get to it. And thanks for tuning in, by the way, to the Smash News Network, least busted name. In news, we've got erupting volcanoes, we've got a coronal mass ejection headed Earth's way, and lots more to cover. Coronal mass ejections happening as we create the video, and lots more. So let's blast through and not monkey around. We're going to add 193 angstroms to the ionized helium from SDO. A lot of activity happening in the southern hemisphere. A very high likelihood of large solar flares in both the southwest and the northeastern limb. A CME happening down here in the southeastern portion. By the way, we put out a great video yesterday about a fantastic prominence. Check out our shorts if you haven't done that. It's youtube.com/smashomash/shorts. Here's some more imagery for you. A new sunspot just rose over the northeastern limb as well. It is large. It doesn't look like it's too magnetically complex at the moment, but you never know if there are trailing umbrae. Here's the northern polar region, and you can expect ground prominences to continue. And you can expect prominent imbeciles to continue to tell you that civilization's going to end because the galaxy is very spooky. Here is the northwestern limb. And we've got some setting regions there, but the most likely place, in my opinion, to see a large solar flare, including a possible X-class flare, is down there at the southwestern limb. See that huge bright spot? Yeah, that's a huge series of sunspots, plasma filaments, magnetically complex regions known as plages, which is kind of like a sub-sunspot in terms of photosphere magnetic organization. Here is just the southern hemisphere by itself. Again, a CME happening there just to the left of the Earth scale as we produce this video. We may have to make another one later today about that if it's earthly directed. Again, there is an earthly directed CME. We're expecting that to arrive. Perfect timing for North America on July 13th. So here's the southeastern limb, and there is a huge filament there as well. A bunch of filaments. We'll cover it and lots more on today's fantastic daily space weather video. And let's take a look at sunspots. Here's yesterday plus today, and I believe we've just moved back well above the 200 sunspot number. I think we'll be, by the end of the day today, we'll be at a sunspot number of like 220. Most of those groups fairly stable there. Here are the magnetic fields from yesterday plus today. That is what's going on in the photosphere. What's going on the lithosphere is interesting as well. Before we get to that, save 20%, by the way, on the Redbubble shop. If you haven't checked it out, you can find links below the video to the Redbubble shop. And it's actually one of our top sellers. I think it's our third top seller now, the Galactic Federation Special Forces. Save 20% on your Galactic Federation Special Forces products. If you're wondering what the symbolism means, the spiral represents the Milky Way galaxy. The lightning bolt represents instantaneous galactic scale reach and signal strength. The key represents signal integrity and security. The bright spot in the upper right represents classified. And there is a smashomash.com on the key, if you're wondering. Super high resolution graphics, by the way. If you get a very large object like, I don't know, like a poster, the resolution is spectacularly high. It's like 4,500 pixels or something like that. Print quality super good from Redbubble. If you haven't seen any other products, check one out. It's a great time to do so. Save 20%. And tell your friends and foes that smashomash.com said Universum Liberate. Here's what's going on in the lithosphere. And it is indeed interesting, to say the least. Fagradalsfjall. Back to erupting. So it's the LD event, I guess. And here is an insane video about this new fissure that's recently opened up, and don't expect a lull in activity. to mean that the activity is over, folks. We're going to cut the volume on that. So yeah, huge series of fissures opening there at Fagradalsfjall. Yes. A bunch of new cinder cones have opened and so forth. It's exciting stuff on the Reykjanes Peninsula. So, not expecting the little lull in activity here to be a real lull in activity. We're expecting the eruption to continue. Whoops. All right, we'll get back to space stuff here in a minute. So, could be a major eruption happening there. It's a good time to be a real estate investor in Iceland, as the island is the island nation is growing there, especially around the southwestern portion. Abiko is also erupting. That's producing a 13,000-foot plume of volcanic ash on Paramushir Island. That is south of Kamchatka, by the way. Sakurajima producing an 8,000-foot ash plume. Subanosejima, 7,000-foot ash plume. Unknown volcanic ash cloud over Mount Mayan in Philippines. Luatolo, discrete volcanic ash emissions of 6,000 feet, flight level 060. Popocatépetl exploding, flight level 200, 20,000-foot ash plume over central Mexico. Headed to Central America, Fuego in Guatemala exploding, flight level 150. Not sure about Sangay, possible volcanic ash emissions. Revenador exploding, flight level 190, flight level 240 over Sabancaya in Peru. As it explodes, it's a 24,000-foot ash plume. Once again, folks, please do not pole vault the caldera. Here's what's going on seismically. There has been one large quake. It was a 6.6 magnitude. That's a 90-day bar graph, by the way. That 6.6 magnitude occurred northeast of Marigot, northeast of the U.S. Virgin Islands, Antigua and Barbuda, and so on. So there's a location of that 6.6 magnitude quake. That happened yesterday. That happened yesterday at 2028 Universal Time. 6.6 magnitude quake there. Let's talk about quakes of a 5 magnitude or higher. There was a 5.0 at the Philippines at 13:01 Universal Time yesterday afternoon. Again, that 6.6 occurred yesterday evening Universal Time at 2028. There was also a 5.7 at the southern East Pacific rise there, kind of in the middle of nowhere in the South Pacific, not likely felt by much of anybody. Not even Easter Island likely to have felt that quake. And that is where the list ends and where our space weather coverage resumes. Here's the past 24 hours of the Southern Hemisphere. And again, the Southern Hemisphere is where the action is currently at besides that northeastern limb. So lots of stuff going on. Again, a CME happening as we produce the video. So we're going to blast through a bunch more information. Here's some more sweet money shots. This remains my favorite spot for an X-class solar flare, the likelihood of which is kind of high at the moment. We'll show you the flare likelihoods calculation here in a minute. First, the full disk view. There's 171 plus 211 angstroms. Some great wavelengths for you there. And here is the 10.7 centimeter radial flux, now at 191 solar flux units. You can expect this to climb once again today. So currently breaking through that 180 solar flux units upward support level that we talked about yesterday. As we ramp up and up and up and up to solar maximum, there's no telling what the maximum sunspot number will be. That's a one-year graph, the radial flux depicted by the black line, the red line depicting the sunspot number. Again, expect that to rise over 200. I think we're at about 220 sunspots if we counted right now. So now, interestingly enough, NASA is not forecasting a CME impact. That's kind of weird, right? Don't they have the most skin in the game? Well, it's kind of true. But NASA is forecasting that CME that seemingly everybody else thinks is headed toward Earth in the opposite direction. So that's NASA's forecast, is a complete miss, that we're all way off forecasting it to strike Earth. So that's interesting. Here's NOAA's forecast. NOAA is forecasting an impact early in the day on the 14th. And it's going to be very minor according to NOAA. So, I mean, we could see as high as a KP 6 or 7 from this event, folks. So don't be surprised to see auroras at mid-latitudes. I mean, it's exciting stuff. So that's sort of what's going on. We're expecting a possible great view of the aurora here in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania on Thursday the 13th. And here is NOAA's forecast. NOAA is saying that rationale, potential CME shock influences may materialize on the 12th of July and have a slight chance of increasing geomagnetic storms to G1 minor levels. The potential extends into 13th July with a chance of G1 levels due to coronal hole high-speed stream effects and any lingering CME shock arrival influences. So, all right, well, I think it's going to show up late in the day on the 13th. NOAA thinks it's going to show up late in the day on the 12th. We'll have to see what happens. I've heard other forecasters coming up with the 13th. So anyway, moving right along here. Here is Earth's magnetic moment from space. We show it daily on the channel. Just to remind our viewers that the magnetic fields are not evaporating. There is a model of them created with a whole series of variables from real-time, nearly real-time data. It's the past 4 hours of Earth's magnetic moment from space. A reminder that space isn't going to kill you, at least not yet. Now, if you want to follow the aurorae, one great way to do it is by showing the ground magnetic perturbations maps. So here is the ground magnetic perturbation map for North America. And keep in mind, this is nearly real time. So it's, once again, it's showing the last 4 hours. And if you see that lit up red where you are located, you might be able to see the aurora. Keep in mind, the aurora can come and go faster than you can snap your fingers at practically light speed. Keep in mind, these are ultraviolet emissions coming from space. So you may have only a small window to catch it, but if you can, make sure you turn on your camera, have it set correctly, look up information on how to set your camera correctly to capture the aurora. Again, it is in the UV spectrum primarily, so if you're able to see it with the naked eye, it will be very bright under your camera. So use your camera. It picks up frequencies both above and below visible light being the only portion visible to the naked eye. So here's the global map, ground magnetic perturbations. This represents Earth's magnetic moment from the ground. It's going to show you the most likely places to see telluric currents, the aurora, pipeline, railway, and power grid induction, etc. Spikes in ground-based magnetometers are where those red areas will be, as well as current passes through the planet. So this is showing changes to Earth's B field, the B field being the field that goes through the magnet, this magnet being the Earth. Other ways you can follow the arrival of coronal mass ejection impacts are with the Boulder magnetometer. That's another pick for you there, the Boulder magnetometer. That will show you quite up-to-date information there in nearly real time. And we can see some spikes happening actually right now on the Boulder magnetometers. So, you know, it shows you just a few hours there, so that's one of the ways you can monitor incoming space weather. Also, you can use the auroral forecast, the 30-minute auroral forecast. So that's another thing that will light up. So that's one of the other tools you can use. And I think perhaps the best tool of all, because you want to use near real-time tools, folks, to get the best possibility of actually seeing the aurora, try using the geoelectric field models US and Canada 1D and 3D EMTF continental US. So this is going to show you the most likely places to see power grid induction. In fact, it's showing you empirical data. It's showing you nearly real-time data on induction into the power grid in millivolts per kilometer. And that big stripe along the East Coast, that is differences in soil composition, differences in Earth's crust, which change the way electrical currents pass through the planet. So again, this will show you in near real time, because remember, the aurora show up and they vanish just as quickly as they arrived. So that's one of the other ways to figure out where the aurora will be visible, hopefully in your location. And if you do get any videos or anything like that of the aurora, hit us up on Instagram or on Twitter. Those are probably the best places. You can also join our Discord server, which is linked right on the homepage at smashomash.com. There's a permanent invite link to our Discord chat there. Planetary K-index currently only at 1.66. It's geomagnetically calm conditions. In terms of earthly geomagnetism averages, solar wind speed here quite unremarkable at density 5.3 protons per cubic centimeter. Solar wind speed here 321 kilometers per second. Very slow. We're expecting a significant signal when we do see coronal mass ejection impacts. GOES magnetometers here, you can expect to see those jump all over the place as well. The GOES magnetometers will get a spiky sort of appearance to them. They'll be like a sawtooth looking series of readings there by the GOES 16 and GOES 18 when the CME or CMEs arrive. I'm not so sure about a coronal hole high-speed stream, but let's just move on here and take a look at the ever-popular top view ecliptic plane field plot. So it looks like that North Pole magnetism right here has left the North Heliographic Pole. You can even see it being replaced by some South Pole magnetism here, which means the floodgates are fully open for solar maximum. Earth is currently in a South Pole-oriented current sheet depicted there in red. And you can expect solar activity to increase for like about 9 months. Here's our line of sight field plot. Here the sun's B field is depicted in blue. Solar polar fields in green and red for north and south respectively. Lots of organized magnetism in the photosphere on the Earth-facing portion of the solar disk. And here's our line-of-sight coronal hole plot, which brings us to our coronal hole coverage. Yeah, coronal hole coverage. You got to have it. They're super important. They show us the solar polar field reversal process. So here we've got 211 plus 171 angstroms, which shows fantastic depth all the way from the outer corona down to the lower corona. And here we've subtracted 171 angstroms to show just 211. Now, if we go back to this, we can see that all of the coronal holes there on the eastern portion, those are indeed all South Pole oriented. So these are all South Pole coronal holes. Over here, we've got North Pole coronal holes. Sector boundary crossing is something like this. Which brings us to sunspots. So here's a sunspot situation. We'll have at least one new major named sunspot group. It's this group up here. That'll be known as 3371. Again, we'll see the sunspot number likely go to about 220 sunspots today, possibly even reaching a new high for Solar Cycle 25's sunspot number progression and radial flux. That's somewhat interesting, wouldn't you say? And let's take a look at sunspots here in spectacular detail from SDO. So here's the past 24 in SDO continuum. That is what approximately 200 sunspots look like. And again, folks, we're not at solar maximum yet. You can expect this to increase in the coming nearly 1 year. So it's an exciting time for space weather indeed. We leveraged ourselves here a long time ago with good reason to advance cosmology. Here we've added 131 angstroms to highlight the active regions. Once again, I remind you that the most likely places to see major solar flares are number 1, down here, number 2, up here, number 3, don't take a number 2 in your pants. The sun is very, 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 very statistically unlikely to kill you. I suppose it might be possible. However, a lot of us think stars are a lot more stable than a lot of other people think stars are. Anyway, that said, here's the past 24 hours. We've added the SDO magnetogram to the 131 angstroms. And let's move to energetic particles and solar flares, since we've actually had a tiny little blip in the SEPs. That's the solar energetic particle events. So let's take a look at that from the GOES datasets. So here is the GOES proton flux. That is the GOES 16. And while it has subsided, there was a minor proton event that went through the day yesterday. It is now back to a flat line. So a minor solar energetic particle event there. There is a channel from the sun to the earth at the moment. A magnetic field line that goes right from the sun to the earth. Anyway, there's the GOES X-ray flux, and you can see it's coming up way higher than it's been here for quite a long time there. The GOES X-ray flux here now around a C3 background level. No major flares, but the likelihood for major flares is incredibly high. I would return to this. Look at the solar flare probability. There's a point here where the likelihood of an X-class flare reaches nearly 25%. 22% there for this number 5. So, yeah, there you go. High likelihood for large solar flares. And let's show the flare wavelengths that we like to show on the channel. It's the ever popular 131 plus 94 angstroms. So there's the full equatorial zoom. Again, the northeast and the southwest are extremely likely to produce large flares. There's also a high likelihood in some other spots, as there are many magnetically complex regions. We're just going to show my favorite to produce an X flare. There's the southwestern limb. Massive amount of plasma suspended by those huge magnetic fields. Very high likelihood of X-class flares as that many sunspots set on the limb. And let's move on to see what's going on overhead. But before we do that, as we encourage our viewers to look up, we encourage our viewers to look in our description as well. So today's featured mushroom gummy product is the stress mushroom gummy. So these contain cordyceps mushrooms. There is the full list. Let's see, active ingredients there. Reishi mushrooms, cordyceps, ashwagandha, and GABA. Also cannabidiol full spectrum distillate. That is the stress mushroom gummies. Check those out if you haven't. As we know, there are a lot of people quite stressed at the moment, so check those out. They will not make you in a brain fog or anything like that. They don't make me sleepy at all. There is a specific one for sleep. There's one for focus. There's one for stress, and there's a variety pack. So check those out. Links below the video to the Hemp Lucid shop. Support the channel that way and support your health perhaps with some increases there. Also follow us on Instagram if you like things like fitness, lifestyle, and diet posts. You can get your daily motivation to do stuff like ride your bike. And if you like the wardrobe, I dress a little bit silly as, well, there's a reason for it, folks. It's because your silliest... Did you ever notice how your silliest teachers are the ones that you learned the most from? Well, there's a reason for that. It's because they're attracting your attention. And anyway, today's featured product on the Amazon shop is my pink flamingo shirt. I've been a long-time 20-plus year collector of Hawaiian shirts, and I'll bet my collection is superior to yours. If you want to beef up your collection, you can find all kinds of links at smashomash.com. And welcome to the Neo Renaissance. Congratulations on realizing this channel exists. We're frankly surprised you found it. Have you heard the Golden Cat Productions tracks on Spotify? Yeah, there's original music as well. There's the permanent invite link to the Discord chat, Patreon, PayPal. If you're wondering if we are on Threads for Instagram, the answer is yes. So you can follow us over there. There's a link on the homepage to that as well. And by the way, respect existence or expect resistance. Here's what's going on overhead at Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. That is the current situation. You've got Mercury trailing the sun there. And if you're viewing the nighttime sky, you might be able to see Mercury, Venus, and Mars if you've got a low horizon and low light pollution, as Mercury is very dim. Mercury is very dim, but perhaps not as dim as some other channels who think they're competition to our space weather content. We think that's cute. Next, a solar system forecast. Here's where heavenly bodies are today, besides the ones who are in chairs watching our videos. Here's where they'll be in 1 week. And it'll be a new moon sometime around then, 1 week out from the July new moon. Shout out to all my reverse werewolves from the Smash News Network, least busted name in news. And let's move to coronal mass ejections, since those are, shall we say, a rather important story. Here are yesterday's CMEs. And the first one, the one that's early in the morning, is the one that is earthly directed. So right there is that one. That's the one we're expecting a possible KP 6.33, a G2 geomagnetic storm. The second one, also out of the southwestern limb primarily, that one may have an earthly directed component. That will arrive a bit later there. It would be a more minor impact, maybe like a KP6. I wouldn't expect it to get much above that, if at all. Keep in mind there will be a lot of empty space in between the Earth and the Sun as that arrives. Now, NOAA's talking about a coronal hole high-speed stream as well. I'm not so sure about all of that. So there may be a second CME headed this way as well. That should arrive a little bit later than the first one, obviously. It took place about 8 hours after the first one. The one coming out of the north there, I don't believe that has an earthly directed component. So that one has an earthly directed component. This one here might have an earthly directed component, and that one probably doesn't have an earthly directed component. So that's a lot of CMEs to cover there. Here are today's frames, an additional 30 frames. And there is a CME happening from somewhere down here in the southeast. So we're going to show you that here in a minute. First, the 24-hour video. So that one has an Earth-directed component. The second one doesn't. Actually, that one doesn't show the one that has an earthly directed component. See yesterday's daily space weather video for that. The one out of the northern hemisphere appears to be on the far side of the sun, so that's not earthly directed at all. This one, the first one depicted on this image. One more time. I don't think that's earthly directed either, but it may cause a minor secondary geomagnetic storm. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. And when I say ion, well, pardon the pun. So there are the past 24 hours in just 193 angstroms, the wavelength that we showed in the middle of those CME videos. It's an exciting time for space weather, and we didn't get here accidentally. I've been a cosmologist since about 1979. I guess I'm dating myself there, but I don't care because I'm more interested in facts. So here are some an additional series of CME videos. Soho Lasco C2 and C3. We also want to show stereo A just for completeness. Unfortunately, at the moment, we don't really have anything in between Earth and Sun. So the Parker Solar Probe's not there to measure the solar wind. Bepi Colombo, the Solar Orbiter. None of those are in a good position at the moment to measure the incoming CMEs. Here's stereo A depicted on the left. All right, so let's break this down here. So here's yesterday. This is the one that we are expecting to strike on the 13th. So here's that one. That's from stereo A. So that is earthly. That does have an earthly directed component, we think. This one here out of the north, probably not. Actually, that's the one that has the earthly directed component. This one here, probably not. Now, that one might have an earthly directed component as well. I think there's going to be a second geomagnetic storm there. So only a few hours after the first one. Maybe about 8 to 10 hours later. It does appear to be more slowly moving than this one. So there's that second one. The one out of the north, I don't believe has an earthly directed component. It looks like it's on the far side. So there's the first one. Actually, there's the aftermath of the first one. There's the second one. That's going to have an earth hit. So there'll be a second impact there, most likely. That one out of the north, not earthly directed. And let's move on to filaments now, because there are still plenty of filaments, especially in the southern hemisphere. So look at all the dark absorption features there. The instability of this one is only growing. In fact, this one is in the process of ejecting as we make the video. So that could actually become earthly directed as well. Now, it is kind of far south, but don't assume, as these things can be flung in very odd directions. We even occasionally see CMEs that impact Earth that are not even coming from a place not even visible. In other words, from around the limb. If you want to name filaments after living people, there's a good candidate that's erupting right now. Follow us over on Twitter and follow the hashtag #NameThatFilament. So here's what's going on the past couple of hours. Again, CME and a flare happening down here. You'll also see perhaps warnings about radio emissions. So once again, a CME happening here as we create the video, and a very high likelihood of major solar flares, including the X-class variety, especially in these two corners. The northeast and southwestern limbs, very likely spots for an X-class solar flare. So that brings us to our bonus feature segment. And we'll start out with the Satellites Community Dashboard. So charging hazards are non-existent. It's smooth sailing for satellites here. No surface or internal charging hazards there. No high or low energy electrons building up on satellites or in satellites. The ghost electron flux here showing a dip. So the electron flux here perhaps lower than forecast. There's the one-year graph to put it in context. We're just in a sort of a moderate range for the relativistic electrons there, which are measured at the F layer of the ionosphere using radiography. There is the forecast model, and it looks like the observation here is going to be a little bit lower than the forecast model for this next update. The green boxes are the forecast. The yellow diamonds are the observation. Here's the layer where that is measured, the F layer of the ionosphere. Observe me, learn to speak English. This layer of the ionosphere, the F layer, that's where the radiographic measurements are endeavored to be done by the GOES 16 and GOES 18. And here's the vibrational frequency of that portion. Feel free to pause the video on that frame if you're not familiar with the penetration of electromagnetic radiation, etc. So here is the raw vibrational frequency in megahertz for the F ionosphere. And you can expect some fireworks coming to this in the coming days. Again, on the 13th, sometime after midday, expecting a CME impact. And then another one sometime late in the day, a second CME impact likely. So here is the anomaly from the 30-day median. No major stuff going on here at the moment in the ionosphere. Things are geomagnetically calm. There's a shakeup coming to that. Anyway, here's the latest image. That's 12:30 Universal Time ionogram and 12:30 Universal Time anomalygram. We also show the total electron content daily, as it does give us insight into perhaps space weather and perhaps even stuff going on planet Earth. Feel free to pause the video on this frame if you're not familiar with those distances. Here is the total electron content forecast. It'll show you the most likely places for GPS errors. It depicts free electrons to about 12,500 miles of altitude. That's the location where your GPS satellite orbits. And we are seeing quite a few electrons here out of place there. Continued major total electron content anomalies, especially in the southern Indian Ocean, the Southern Ocean, and around Antarctica. So right in this time frame, right in here, major total electron content anomalies. Here is the anomaly gram over North America. That's anomaly from the 10-day average. We are seeing some high electron content anomalies there over places like Cuba. Also the western U.S. showing some minor signals there. So we'll let that play through one more time. That's the total electron content anomaly from the 10-day average there. The coupled thermosphere, ionosphere, plasmasphere electrodynamics model depicting the free electrons. Here is your latest intensity gram and latest magnetogram. I'll briefly show you these magnetic fields and these sunspots. Those are magnetically complex enough to produce major solar flares. There are some deltas there, but more importantly, it is approaching the limb. That is when we see the largest flares, period. Here is the northeast, and that sunspot looks more complex than it may appear. I suspect there are some South Pole umbrae trailing that. Here's the full disk view. And a little bit of weakness showing up in the middle of this sunspot. Interestingly enough, you can see it doesn't really show very much. It's still pitch black there in the middle. However, the field has weakened, so that sunspot might be degrading. Don't be surprised to see that grow some additional umbrae behind it especially. And actually, that will increase its likelihood to flare if it indeed does produce some trailing umbrae. At the moment, it's an alpha class sunspot. It only has one really distinctly defined umbra there. These tiny little pores here behind it of North Pole orientation are very minor. Anyway, there are plenty of areas to see major flares. We've talked about the most likely ones. So let's move on to our meteorology segment. And by the way, thanks for tuning into the space weather content. It's surprising to us that you were able to find the channel considering the ridiculous state of affairs when it comes to things like social media and trying to run an online digital-based business. It has been less than optimal for the past 3 years for people like us. So again, make sure you hit comment, share, press the like button if you haven't subscribed to the channel. Press subscribe. What we're looking at here is sea surface temperature anomaly and ocean currents. So for everybody telling you the sun's shutting down, the galaxy's going to kill you, it's a grand solar minimum, etc., here are some facts. The water in the North Atlantic is anomalously warm. You see that? Warm, 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 warm. The North Sea is warm. The Mediterranean's warm. Warm, warm, warm. Warm off the the west coast of Africa. Warm, warm, warm is the sea surface temperature anomaly. Not cold. Not going to shut down the Gulf Stream. Look at the Gulf Stream is animated right here. The animation is currents, and there you go. The Gulf Stream is not shutting down, folks. The Gulf Stream is not shutting down. If you've been banking on a grand solar minimum, go to a different bank, because your bank is bankrupt. The Gulf Stream is doing a perfectly fine job warming Europe. It's not a year without a summer. Oh no, the Beaufort Gyre, the Beaufort Gyre. Yes, I know about the geologic record and how 60,000-year glaciations happen. We're not seeing one happening. Look at the warm equatorial Pacific Ocean. Look at the warm North Pacific. Here's the Southern Ocean. It's kind of just in a normal range here. It's partly anomalously cold, partly anomalously warm. Here's the Indian Ocean, mostly on the warm side. Here's the Atlantic Ocean, very much on the warm side. And there is the Arctic Ocean, which is a mixed bag. Hopefully what you're viewing on YouTube isn't a mixed bag of crap featuring people who don't know anything about science, who keep just pivoting and leveraging a bunch of nonsense and people's fear while claiming to promote a lack of fear. It's absolutely ridiculous. And some of the, quote, climatologists out there are criminally negligent. Is that an appropriate term? Anyway, let's move to our meteorology segment here, and I'll stop complaining and ranting about noobs on YouTube who know nothing about science but claim to. Here are the surface winds of the eastern world. By the way, if you're in this location right here, tell the other 3 billion people about our channel. Would you? Would that be okay? Thanks. Here are the jet streams of the Eastern world. Here are the jet streams of the Western world. We show them daily on the channel because they're largely in control of your global weather patterns, which are not controlled by mankind, by the way. If you think mankind controls large-scale global weather patterns, take a physics class, just one, and get a clue. Here are the surface winds for the west. Oh no, there's a low pressure over the Hudson Bay. It's, oh my God. Wait, that's not the Hudson Bay. That's something, whatever. Oh no, there's a low, folks. It means it's time to get in your bunker. Here are the surface winds of the central world. And here are the jet streams blowing backwards over the Indian Ocean, which, by the way, also does not mean that the world is ending. Now, let's talk about snow, since people who know nothing about climate or weather constantly talking about snow. Following the 7th year of record snowfall in the Northern Hemisphere, there actually still is a very high snow water equivalent taking place. So, I mean, if you look at the extent is a little higher than normal. In fact, it's well outside of the plus or minus 1 standard deviation, which is the area between those blue bars. If you look at the snow water equivalent, it's also still very high, way outside of the plus or minus 1 standard deviation area between those blue bars. So there's been a lot of snow. If you're wondering what's going on in the Southern Hemisphere, so are we. First of all, let's take a look at the Northern Hemisphere. So there's the winter. I mean, that's snow extent. That's 2-dimensional area covered by snow. Here's the Rutgers snow extent tracker. Not really that high snow extent, but some very high snow totals in terms of depth. If you're wondering what's happening in the Southern Hemisphere, so are we. So here's the data from that. It's kind of in the middle of the range there. Nothing exciting happening as far as South America. What about Australia and New Zealand? Kind of low for snow extent at the moment. Again, that says nothing about snow depth. And let's move on here to what in the heck did I do? Whatever I did, it was unintentional. And for that, we apologize. The heck are we trying to show there? Oh, we're trying to switch to soil moisture anomaly here. Yeah, the soil moisture anomaly. So there is the anomalously moist and dry soil for the U.S. Here's the drought intensity map. Again, there is moisture anomaly. And that is in inches, by the way. And here is the soil moisture raw data. Next, we've got clouds and fog over the Americas. As we zoom in closer and closer to the lower 48, that is what's going on. A huge cell just formed over Oklahoma and is moving toward the Gulf. Check it out. Massive cloud. A cloud about the size of the entire state of Arkansas has formed. And it is causing some issues, including severe thunderstorm warnings, etc. Here's weather.gov. If your location is lit on weather.gov, head to weather.gov and click your location. That is too many counties to cover. We'll briefly scroll down to show you the key. As we've got some heat advisories and red flag warnings and some major precipitation type severe storm warnings there in Oklahoma. That is moving to the southeast toward Louisiana, etc. So since heat is one of the things that we're seeing in the forecast, here is your temperature anomaly forecast in degrees Celsius based on the GFS model for the next 72 hours. Again, it's your 72-hour GFS temperature anomaly forecast in degrees Celsius. Here is your GFS 72-hour pressure and precipitation forecast. Please heed your weather warnings. Don't go on a bike ride if there is a hailstorm coming. That is a bad move. One of the only things that cancels a bike race, folks, is a severe thunderstorm. Last but not least, here's the total accumulated precipitation forecast based on the same GFS 72-hour model. It is in inches, so that's a 72-hour total accumulated precipitation forecast in inches based on the GFS, and we do have a couple pockets there of extreme rain coming, pushing 5 to 6 inches in parts of Nebraska and Missouri. Also Illinois. Next, we've got lightning, so let's cover it. Here's the last about 10 hours from the NASA GOES lightning mapper. Again, major lightning there moving toward Louisiana. So here's the current situation. We won't spend too much time on this real-time lightning map from lightningmaps.org. Give that a minute to spool up to show us where the active cells are, and that is a strong front there, just northeast of Dallas and moving toward Shreveport. Let's briefly show the whole planet map. As autumn approaches for the northern hemisphere and spring for the southern. There's the current situation. And by the way, these videos were brought to you in part at massive personal risk and expense by Smash Staff and I. As we are a two-person operation, she is a partner in the operation. So give Smash Staff a raise. Why don't you become a member of the Smash team? If you'd like email alerts about videos just like this one, the way to do it is by becoming a member of the Smash team. There's even a bronze level, which will cost you absolutely nothing. It'll cost you $0 per month to sign up for email alerts at the bronze level. You would think people would want to do that with all the complaints about YouTube not sending notifications, but they generally don't. So if you're watching the videos and you would prefer to see when we put up content, might be a good idea. We also send out things like tsunami alerts and things like that. There's a gold, there's a silver. The best value is the gold annual paid-up subscription, as it includes complimentary merch. Smashomash.com/Smash Team, links below the video and on the homepage to the Smash Team site, our own subscription services site, because we said, hey, Patreon, you're not cutting it. We need more capabilities. We'll close out with U.S. Doppler radar. Clouds and fog. Massive cloud there. And here you can see that rapid rainfall happening. Look at that. That's like millions of tons of water coming out of the ground, making it into the air, and then moving to the southeast. That is major rainfall happening there. And that system, again, moving towards Shreveport, at least while we recorded the video. We'll show a brief close-up of that system, as it is pretty beefy. It may have some damaging winds and hail, especially in the southeastern portion of the storm. Keep in mind, the most dangerous portion of a thunderstorm in the northern hemisphere is the northwestern corner. That's where the tornadoes tend to show up. Here is the clouds and fog view, as it's just getting light over there. And here is the water vapor map. So there's a constrainment of drier and more massive air there happening. A great example of high pressure all around the system, creating compression. You've got an impulse from the northwest. You've got higher pressure to the south. You've got higher pressure to the east. You've got higher pressure to the north, constraining all that moisture in a tight region. And hopefully your YouTube content has been constrained to a tight region of making sense, being coherent, and being useful. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Once again, don't forget to press the like button, subscribe, share, comment, etc. Tell your friends and foes about the videos, because, well, we are not exactly satisfied with YouTube recommendations. It's pretty pathetic. And in the meantime, I'm headed back to the bunker because I've been spooked. I've been spooked by space, folks. Let us know in the comments if you're spooked by space. Tell us what's in your bunker. Tell us the depth. We hope your bunker is just the right depth. And I'm headed back to... Oh, and by the way, when I'm gone, may that solar wind be at your back. I'm going back to the bunker again. Whoa!